What's up, my dudes? My name is Sister Turley. Is James Stewart the fastest rider of all time? I'll calm down now. So, personally, I mean, when you talk about raw speed, Stewie's got it going on, dude. I don't know how you can really compete in Stewart's true enough prime days. I mean, I really do think you could say he was the fastest motocross rider of all time. Now, does that mean he was the best motocross rider of all time? That's where it starts to kind of build that conversation. I mean, personally, I think Villapoto was the greatest of all time, but everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I'm not trying to say that you need to think the same way as me. I mean, you can think Stewart's the greatest of all time. You can think Carmichael's the greatest of all time. You can think whoever else is the greatest of all time, but it's just one of those things that I think when you talk about raw, just speed, James Stewart, it's like he's on another level. And James Stewart, I think that was one of his biggest problems whenever he was trying to kind of come back in like 2000 and what was that, 16, right around that time, is the fact that Stewart only has two options, okay? He has wide open and he has no throttle. There is no in between with James Stewart. You understand what I'm saying? There is just a flip of the switch with him. There is no like middle consistent ground riding. He is either wide open or he's on the ground. And that's just the way it is with James Stewart. It's pretty much always been that way with James Stewart. So, I mean, when you talk about it in a championship type scenario, the riding style that Stewart has really is sort of a short-lived style of riding. I mean, you're either going to crash and hurt yourself or you're never going to win a title, or you're only going to win one title. You know, and James Stewart, I mean, he was probably the funnest rider to watch. I mean, I think Villapoto was really, really fun to watch because Villapoto could ride like a Stewart at times, but then tone it down at other times. You know what I'm saying? Villapoto just had it was crazy. It looked like Villapoto, the easiest way to explain it, he looked like a flowing river. You know what I mean? Like, that's what Villapoto looked like on the track. Everyone else, when you compare them directly to Villapoto, everyone else looked like they were riding on some kind of enduro, bouncing around, not going in the right lines at all, even though they would smoke me in real life. But that's my whole point. You know, Villapoto puts all of them other pro dudes to shame because he just looks that amazing. But Stewart, he had that ability to ride that bike at the absolute maximum. So he was a really, really fun rider to watch. And I mean, not to mention the crazy crashes he's had in the past and stuff like that. It's been a wild thing for sure. But yeah, dude, Stewart, he's a legend, man, for sure. I mean, it's just like, man, it's just crazy when you go back and look at some of the footage. He's a highlight reel kind of rider. Like, anytime Stewart's on the track, you're going to get a show, pretty much, period. And, I mean, honestly, Stewart, that's why he had so much trouble coming back, man, because he could not, like, get it in his head to only ride at 80% or 70% until he got his racing skill back. He just couldn't do it. He was so in that James Stewart mode of all or nothing that he just could not tone it back down and get it back to a consistent level to work himself back up to the point to where he was. You know, like all that way through 2000, whatever, 4, 5, 6, 7, when he was on the 125, then went to the 252 stroke, and then the 450 class like that. He basically kept it pretty steady. I mean, he didn't miss like multiple years at any point in time there. So he was always keeping somewhat of a consistent basis of race skill. And then when he had this whole incident that he missed, like, what was that, like a full year, and then he kind of missed a little bit more, and then I don't know how long it ended up being, but it seems like that was his longest time away from riding, or actually racing, I should say. Seemed like that was his longest time he's spent completely away from it. So I think that really, really hurt him in the long run because he just couldn't get it figured back out. In your mind, when it gets to the level of a Stewart speed, it is like completely instinctual. You know, it's all mind, muscle memory. When you're going that fast, you're not even thinking. You're just going. So when you don't do it for like 2 years, then your mind can't even keep up with it. Then you can't even do it anymore. You know what I mean? So it's like such a crazy thing when they spend their whole lives working up to something and then they miss a couple years. It's like so hard for them to get it back, it seems like. But yeah, man, I mean, Stewart, he's wicked, dude. Like, that's the only word for him. Wicked, bad to the bone. Like I'm saying, Villopoto could ride, you know, pretty much at the level of Stewart at certain times, but he just toned it down at other times. And, you know, even Tomac kind of gives me that same sort of vibe nowadays. He kind of rides the same way. But Stewart, he took it to even a little bit more, I feel like, than how, you know, Villopoto at his maximum speed, Tomac at his maximum speed. I feel like Stewart was maybe even a little more than that. You know what I mean? That's why I'm saying I pretty much feel like he's the greatest speed rider of all time. Because he, even of all of those greats, I still feel like just raw speed-wise, he is the greatest, which is just one skill of motocross. You know, don't get my words twisted into thinking that he's like, that I feel that he's the greatest of all time, because I really don't. I mean, you can have all the speed in the world, but it's all about holding it together, right? If you can't hold it together, then did that speed really matter? I don't know. I mean, it's fun to watch, and it was amazing to see it, and it was just a really cool thing. But as far as like how good that was for championship scenarios and race scenarios, I mean, he's ended so many championship hopes from riding like that, but at the same time, he's going down the history books, you know, for what he's done. And so it's just kind of all in how you look at it. But yeah, he'll be the biggest rider that's ever only had 2 Supercross championships. I'll say that right now. He'll be the most famous, popular rider for the amount of titles that he ended up getting. You know, he really doesn't have all that many titles when you actually think about it, compared to some of the other greats in the Supercross, motocross realm. But I think he'll be the most popular rider, the biggest rider with the least amount of titles and championships with his riding style, you know, just by the way that he's always rode. But yeah, definitely let me know in the comments what you guys think. I know there's going to be some crazy opinions going on. No, you don't know shit. Spencer Stewart is the greatest of all time. Like, dog, that's just your opinion. Like, it's cool if you think differently than me, but personally, it's just, I mean, if you sat them all down and was like, okay, all these dudes are going to race in a Supercross and a motocross championship, you know, both championships in a year. Let's just say you could take all the greatest riders of all time and put them in 1 year of Supercross and motocross. As far as the actual title, all of them in their prime, let me clarify, all of them in their like greatest prime time mode that they're in. I'm not talking about like 2016 Stewart or whatever, whenever he was riding. I'm talking about like, you know, 07, 08, 09 style Stewart. And he was even wicked into like 14 and stuff like that too, doing some crazy quads and stuff. But yeah, if you could get all those riders, I'm talking McGrath, I'm talking Carmichael, I'm talking Dungey, talking Stewart, Villopoto, all of them dudeskies, Reed, all of them in there. My money would be on Villopoto for the title of Supercross and motocross, right? Like, you might be able to put your money somewhat on McGrath in Supercross, but he wasn't that big of a motocross rider, right? You might be able to put your money somewhat on Carmichael for the motocross, but he wasn't a super crazy big Supercross rider. Super crazy big Supercross. Oh my gosh. But like, you know, Stewart might win some of the races. He might smoke them in a couple of the races, but as far as the title, you know, it gets questionable. Dungey, he'll be in there in the points, but if you got all them other good riders, they'll find a way to maybe, you know, get a little bit ahead of Dungey in the long-term title type situation. So, I mean, all in all, my money would be on Villopoto. That's where I sort of judge the greatest of all time in that sense, in my personal opinion. That's how I do it. I basically just sit down and say, okay, take all of them, put them all in the same series, Supercross, motocross, for 1 year. Who's going to win the title, right? That's how I basically pick the greatest of all time rider in my head. But I mean, Stewart, he's, you know, up there on the most fun to watch. Just wild on the bike, you know, like always pushing that bike to the absolute limit. I mean, the absolute limit. There's been times where Stewart just looked like a complete alien, like he wasn't even from this planet at all. Fastest man on the planet ain't even from this planet. That's literally the vibe you got when you watched James Stewart ride during his prime. It was just like seeing, you just couldn't even believe your eyes, you know? He really did give you that sort of feeling, and it's just an amazing thing when a rider can do that. Look so far advanced from all the other riders that look so far advanced from your standard riders, right? They can separate themselves that much from all the other pro level riders. It's just crazy when it gets to that point. But yeah, Stewart basically invented the scrub. I mean, God dang, that's crazy, man. Like when you sit down and think about what Stewart has accomplished, but like hasn't accomplished at the same time, it's kind of crazy. You know, when Villopoto came, Villopoto is a champion. Like, Villopoto is a champion in the sense of he can do it when everybody else is there. You know, Villopoto has got that, like, perfect balance to him. His riding style is just so fluent and fast at the same time. Villopoto knew how to always be right on that edge without going too far over or too far under, whereas I feel like Stewart went too far over quite a few occasions and quite a bit of the time, and Dungey was a little too far under quite a bit of the time. Whereas Villopoto, it's funny, it's like Villopoto is like you mixed Dungey and Stewart together. I mean, that's basically what he is. And when you think about that in your head, like if you're just sitting there, you think about how Stewart is, right? Then you think about how Dungey is, right? And if you're thinking like, dude, would that not be the perfect motocross rider ever if those two dudes had a baby? Well, that's Villopoto for you. So, yeah, man. But Stewart, I mean, I would put him down as the fastest of all time, speed-wise, you know, just sheer speed. There's a lot of people that can go fast, right? There's a lot of people that ain't scared to twist that throttle, but I mean, Stewart, it's just, he was on a crazy level with it, man. I mean, just unreal riding style. It'll never be forgotten in the motocross world what Stewart did and how he was able to actually do it. Never, ever be forgotten, dude. It's just, he's legendary level material for sure. Just some of the crazy, like, I don't know. He found ways to hit stuff on a supercross track that there ain't another soul in this world could hit, you know. He just found the way to do it. Like, he was the guy that when nobody else was hitting the quad, he was hitting it on a supercross track. He was like the quad god, as you could call him. Like, you know, definitely that kind of guy. Villopoto would buck up and do it if he had to, right? If Stewart hit a quad, right, then Villopoto would be like, okay, I got to hit the quad. But Stewart would always be the one to really do it and be the first one to do it and do it consistently. And Villopoto would only do it when he absolutely had to. And then Dungey just wouldn't even do it. So, but yeah, it's just, that's kind of your dynamics of rider styles, and such a cool thing when you go back and look at them. But, yeah, all those years of Stewart racing with Carmichael, no telling, you know, Stewart was definitely racing. I mean, Carmichael's considered the greatest of all time, even though that's not necessarily how it is in my book, but he is considered the greatest of all time. So, and Stewart, that was basically who he was racing as soon as he got into the 450 class supercross and motocross. So he had it rough there at the beginning, but I think Carmichael said this in an interview, like he felt like a part of Stewart retired when, you know, Carmichael retired. Like he felt like Stewart just wasn't the same after Carmichael retired. And I kind of feel the same way too. He just didn't have that same, I don't know. There's just something about it. He just didn't have. And then that one year where Stewart was leading in the motocross points, that was in like maybe 2011, 12, something like that. And that dude ran across the track, and then Stewart like crashed in the very next corner. He had won like 2 of the races in a row, I think. And I was really thinking he was going to win that championship. And then that dude, that like photographer or whatever, ran across the track and got in his way, and then he ended up crashing in that next corner, and then that basically ruined his championship. Very, very bizarre incident there. But yeah, there's just no telling, man. I mean, he's like probably, I mean, a lot of people probably consider Stewart like the greatest 125 rider of all time, which is a very cool thing. You guys know me. Love my 125s, dude. That's one of the first real racing dirt bikes I got, and that's been my racing number for forever. I've always had that number. So it's a 125 is definitely a big deal to me, and that's cool that Stewart was kind of the 125 dude. But yeah, I mean, if you could only just put like Villopoto, Stewart, Dungey, Carmichael, all those dudes back on a motocross track again, woo-wee. I would pay big bucks to see that, dude. You know, it's just, damn, it just sucks that you can't just put them all back in there and watch them again. That was some of the best racing of all time, dude, because they would just be so far ahead. Oh my gosh. I mean, like nowadays, it's not like it was back then. I mean, the closest guy to it is probably Tomac, but even still then, like back in the day, you had like 3 or 4 Tomacs on the track. You know, you'd have like Stewart, Villopoto, I mean, even Dungey at certain points, you know, you would have those dudes at that, like 3 or 4 dudes at that level, where it feels like now you only really got one dude at that level with Tomac, even though he's not super consistent. Kind of gives me a little bit of that Stewart vibe with some of his riding style. But like all your dudes that aren't on Tomac's level, there's like 9 or 10 of them that are not even really on Tomac's level. He's the only guy that's on that level. And so like, but back then you had Villopoto, Stewart, Dungey. A lot of those dudes seemed to be on that level at that time. Carmichael, you know, seemed to be on that crazy next level. But when you talk about speed, it was like Stewart was on even another level than those crazy level dudes, which is like, it's just unbelievable, you know? I mean, it's like picturing how fast Tomac goes, but a little bit more than that, you know? A little bit more out of control. That was Stewart for you right there. Just raw, wicked dude, man. No other way to explain it. So either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.